You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Welcome to Fika. Our guests today, as we continue the quest of the wannabe author, are authors Janice J. Richardson and Brian Greiner. Between them, they have completed and published 15 books. Brian 9 and Janice 6, with 3 more at the editors. So they're even. I chose today. Well, they're even. I decided I would take them out of the comment section and bring them into the studio because they have a lot of experience and they've been a great help to me, and I'm sure they will be a great help to you as well. Welcome back to Fika, Janice and Brian.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us back.
Oh, it's just a continuation of Writers Group, right?
Yes.
And we were discussing that last week. We were discussing finding the writers group that is good, right for you. Now, Janice and Brian started a writers group a couple years ago, and they invited me as I had met them both through Fika. So we're doing a bit of an experiment today. We're going to be much better behaved people, not what I saw in the green room before. And we may have a few prompted topics, but we're going to get started. Anything you wanted to say before we got started?
No. I'll be good.
We're going to. Do you want to follow our regular prompts, or do you just want to get into editor versus no editor, or other options for editors? Or is this on our mind, people?
Yeah, you had a good list of topics. I would suggest starting at the top and sort of working into the controversial ones.
Okay. I just want to make sure you can concentrate on something else right now. So, last week we were also discussing knowing thyself. It's difficult to write a book and develop certain writing habits if you don't really know who you are. So, the one thing that anybody who watches this show knows is that Brian asks almost every author, are you a pantser or a plotter? Meaning, do you take care of the details before you start, or you just sit down and start writing the story? But I have never actually heard Brian answer that question himself. So on the hot spot is Brian. And Brian, are you a pantser or a plotter?
I've given this some thought, and I'm more of a sketcher to throw in another term.
You just can't fit in, Brian.
Exactly. I don't fit in anywhere. That's that's why I'm a writer. To me, a book is like a painting, and some people have a very detailed outline and sketch, and other people just sort of slap things on. I need a sketch of some sort. I need a rough idea of the overall structure, the overall theme, if you will, and an idea of how it's going to start, how it's going to end, and at least a couple of important moments in the middle. And then I can write to that. Having that much allows me to have a bit of focus, if you will, as rather than trying to imagine everything from scratch. At least I can say, well, as I'm stuck, but I'm working towards such and such, even if I change my mind along the way, which I usually do, but at least it gives me a start. It gets me asking questions and finding solutions to the problems and the traumas that I put my characters through.
Yes, you do. You like to put your characters through traumas. Okay, so I have a problem with that, Brian, right off the bat, but we won't go into that today. But you are a note taker too. You take an extensive amount of notes as before you even get to the sketching part, as you would put it.
Yeah.
You have a feeling for the story. You have little sections of the story already completed in your mind.
Yeah, well, it's also themes and questions. When I started out, I would have these grand ideas. Well, no, that's that's actually not the way it works for me, as I found out after hitting my head against a brick wall. I need to have some idea, and I'll come up with little snippets. And a lot of them I don't even use, but they will be, I go, ooh, this would be something neat. And after a while of thinking, they gel into something, a more cohesive whole, because you can't just have a good scene. You can't just have a great chapter. It has to be a story arc.
Yeah.
And as I've told you, Jan, and pretty much everyone else, the story is all. We as writers are slave to the story. What's good for the story needs to be done, and if that means shattering our fragile little egos, well, then so be it. As you say, I take notes. I have written entire chapters that I'm very proud of, with some good dialogue and good action, and I've thrown them away because they don't fit the story.
That's
or
right.
I thought of a better way to incorporate that idea into the story, perhaps because it raises more interesting questions. That's one of the things. As part of my sketch, to me, every book starts with a question. It might be vaguish, but then my writer's block starts when I can't answer the question, or I realize the question doesn't apply to the story, because the story has veered off into a strange route, usually a better route than what I had planned. So pantsing is good when it's kept in moderation, because it allows you a process of discovery of the story, and it leaves yourself open for interesting ideas to bubble up from your subconscious.
But Brian, we are not saying it is good. We're saying it's good for Brian because you are knowing yourself. And that is, we're going to be kind to everyone for knowing themselves. Just listen, take points, but you don't have to follow any of them. Okay, so that being said, and changing things to be good for the story. I mean, I think we all do that. Plotter, pantser, whatever. I just ripped, like, going back and getting reacquainted with my story, and because I changed the illness, the ending just had to get completely changed. But I haven't completely killed it. I've put it back in a little corner, saying maybe another character can use it further down the series.
Exactly, yeah.
So that wasn't like a clean cut, but sometimes you have to make a clean cut. So do you think the book, the story, sometimes calls for a little more plotting or a little more pantsing? For example, if like espionage, a spy novel where you have a lot of different things going on, do you think that might take a little more plotting in advance?
Oh, heavens, yes. Because when you've got a complex structure, you have to keep track of the complexities written down somehow, because there's very few people are going to be able to keep it all in your mind, because it's not just like a flat storyboard. It's a three-dimensional structure, because the story has a beginning, middle, and end, which means it's the story does evolve. It's hard to put that down as an static thing. I use several tools to help me keep track of things, and doing that, writing it down sometimes allows you to see gaps in the story, or new and exciting questions to ask that you force your characters to solve. For my fifth book in the Bob series, things got really complex. There were things going on in parallel in different parts of the galaxy, and so there was a time element, and I had to, for the first time in the Bob series, worry about exact timings, whereas rather than sort of hand waving it. And I ended up using a piece of software that is designed to look at timelines, which I've shown to the group. I actually wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago, if people are interested in the details. It's a piece of software called Aeon Timeline. And it's absolutely brilliant. You can look at your timeline in different ways, look at where your characters are and who's interacting with whom. And it's for a complex story, it just saves the author.
I think I need that because I have people traveling all over Canada and getting together like on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. FaceTime. Thank you. No one helped me. I was left alone. So, Brian, if you want to send me that link, and then I will also share it on.
I can throw it into the comments now if you like, but.
Oh, yeah. The problem with the comments is that they don't show up unless you're watching the whole video. Like they show up at the time. So But
I can certainly email that
send it my way.
The show notes. Yeah.
Now, by coincidence, our actual writing group takes place at 2:00 on Thursdays. Luckily, it's online, so I go from here to there. And Janice was there last week, and we were discussing how long it takes to write a book, that there is no timeline for it. But they said you can write a book in 180 words. And they also said you can write it much faster. And Janice said, but I wrote Casket Cash in 30 days. But there were some things that made that a little bit easier, wasn't there, Janice, when it came to
Well, actually, it was Winter's Morning. It's the second one. Because, I completed Casket Cash, and I was on a roll. And I had all the time in the world. I'm retired. I can, we have the advantage of being retired, group of us. So I was able to poop it out in a 30-day period, and it just flew. It just flew by. It was an easy write.
And how long did it take you to write Casket Cash? Do you remember?
Probably about 3 months or so.
Okay.
Because it was kind of my first effort, and I really didn't know what I was doing. So I spent a huge amount of time online learning how to do all these things. You have such a wealth of resources online if you're a writer to learn. Okay, this is maybe how you might want to do it. It's not. Some things are carved in stone. Edits are carved in stone. Covers should be carved in stone. The idea or the current or whatever. But for the most part, you can learn, and you can learn to adapt, and that's how it goes. And what are you grinning about?
Looking at your answer, I'm just laughing. I can feel Brian's brain churning.
Yeah, I can see it
saying
churning.
The fixed in stone things. You
That's
had to get that in there.
Okay,
but back to this. The thing is and yes, there is a wealth of information, but we can also get sucked down that rabbit hole. I'm going to suggest, because I'm a huge, I constantly get sucked down rabbit holes, whether it's what happened in Rome or what happened, how to write, is that you find something and you practice it for a while and then decide if you think, hey, that looks good, I'm going to do it and see if it works before you keep checking out other articles. Because there are also, like anything, indie writing is becoming popular. Writing is becoming popular among the older people. I feel like it's because it's not the old days where you could sit there and the kids would listen to your experiences. They're gone. They're out of there. So you have to put them somewhere. So find something that you think will work and check it out. If it's your first time around, you don't know if you're a plotter or pantser or sketcher. And I think deep down, all of us are a bunch of those things, because as Susan pointed out last week, you start off pantsing, but then you've got to stop and do some plotting to get. So I think it's just the timing of when you do those things that works for you. So don't just keep reading different articles and stress yourself out saying, oh my gosh, which one am I going to do? Just find something you think will work. But also, Janice, what I think helped you, and I'm telling you now, I'm leading this, what I think, yes, I'm bossy in writing club, writing group. Janice, is that you knew, like you were a funeral director. So you were writing what you knew, which is a good idea. Yeah, what you know. And which is a good thing for a first novel, I think. Like, wasn't that helpful?
It was helpful because it turned into a series, which was easy enough because funeral service keeps going. So the series just simply evolved. And I sit down and write out plots? Very seldom. Very, very seldom, unless I had a plot bunny in the middle of the night. And I've always tried to keep a piece of paper beside my bed, and my pen is there. And plot bunnies in the middle of the night are sometimes some of your best ideas, at least for me. So that's often a way that I would do it too. So to write a series is very, very easy to do. Standalones are feel harder to me. Everybody's different, but I find standalones very challenging.
Well, once you get your and Brian the Bob writes series as well. And so I'm writing a series because they told me to. And I always listen to what Brian and Janice tell me to do. But as an author, you don't have to let go of the characters so quickly. And you do have those characters, and you can really give them a time to grow.
Yes.
You know, and be abused if you're Brian. But by the author, it's not. So there's an endearing quality to series. But do you ever find when you're writing a series, like, I think if I look honestly, when we go back to my chart of what went wrong, I talked to many authors. That's what we're wrong. I listened to so many people that wrote series that said, I wish that I had, made some points in the first book. I didn't, that would have alluded to things happening later on in the series. That I started thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to, like, I started in my head writing 3 books instead of 1. And got confused and caught up with what was actually happening in that book with the main character of that book, as opposed to everybody. And do you find that can be a problem, thinking ahead too far? No, that's just me.
No, I'm a pantser. I don't think that far ahead. I know pantsters. I probably am almost 100% pantster. I'm almost ashamed to say it because I sit down and I write a book. That's all I do, and then I don't go back like 6 years later and think, oh darn, I maybe should have put this in book 1 because I don't. It's not how my brain works. So, but everybody's different. We're all different writers. So
Janice is not an overthinker. Vicky is. Brian, are you an overthinker or are you?
Oh God, yes.
I could have sort of guaranteed that.
Yeah.
So,
but I can see things in my later. Like Bob started out as a standalone, and then I'm going, okay, there's all sorts of interesting things I can do with this character. So it grew into 2 books, and then I said, no, that's the end. It's it's a nice ending. And then I started thinking, well, what would happen if Bob had to deal with the consequences? And then I realized that the main theme that I was exploring was actions have consequences. And so every pair of books in the Bob series is like a mini arc, but they all fit within a bigger arc where Bob is dealing with consequences. And they're not, and sometimes they're not his problems, but he's got to play cleanup.
Yeah, no,
and
such is life.
Yeah. And in the meantime, he has to live his own life. So he grows and changes from this carefree, a devil may care at the beginning. And in book 5, he has a wife and kids. And that changes him.
Older kids.
And older kids who are spreading their wings and not necessarily following orders. So,
Yes, they do.
and he is not he had a pretty horrible upbringing, so he's got no basis for being a good parent, but he tries really hard. And basically his approach is train them to handle anything, and if something bad comes after them, you pretty much stomp at the bad thing no matter the cost to himself.
And so what you felt was missing in the first book in that series, you corrected through this bigger arc.
Yeah, well,
further down the series.
Yeah, things grew. The things that were missing were basically details of how bits and pieces worked in the Bob universe. But I used hints dropped in the first couple of books, and I expanded upon them, like little throwaway lines. I'm going, hey, that would make a great minor arc, as I explore that. Like I mentioned that he never got along well with his older brother. That was like a throwaway line in the first book. Well,
it
by
became
book
the
4,
story.
it became a huge story, and it talked about philosophy and meaning of life, not to be trite about it, but how people approach life and how people's actions create ripples beyond what they had originally planned. And
Brian's
sometimes
so philosophical.
Isn't it though?
So Brian, how long, and I hesitate to ask this, how long does it take you to write a book, considering that each of your books is a series unto itself?
Yeah. I never start writing
words?
series.
How many words are there?
The first books were 60 to 70,000 words. Bob 5 is this monster, 130,000. Because I know that you've been complaining about the size of it.
I'm not complaining about the size. I'm just saying I read it between all the other reading that I do. So it seems like it's taking forever, and I'm not interested. But it's just I have to stop it for a while to get. I'm finding it very interesting the way that you are truly rounding up the story.
Yeah,
which is something that a lot of people.
It has turned into a saga. A book like the Werewolves of Winter, which is a shorter book. It's 65, 70,000 words. It flew by.
This is going wide.
Yeah. Yeah. Jan, bless her, read it even though she hates horror, and said that there are parts of the world she can't go to anymore because of the book. But the first draft was done in like 2 months. I started by doing the NaNoWriMo, the National November Writing Month.
Right, which actually the camp is on right now, so you can still catch up with that, people, if you want to grab into it.
It's for people who aren't interested. It's a good way to get people off their butts and writing and focused on writing and producing 50,000 words in a month, and which is a good fraction of a book.
I did that, but then the book just sat there and sat there. And...
whereas for my first 3 or 4 books, Nano got the book started,
rolling. So it was the catalyst.
Yeah.
To get you ready.
Now that's just the writing. I would do some research, make some notes for a month or 2 prior to that, so that I could hit the ground running. So I had a sketch, as I alluded to earlier, of how it was going to go, where it was going, what the ending was going to be. It's always.
So once you start writing, it's just a race to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it's also an exploration. Part of the problem with writing and being a sketcher is that although I have a rough plan, I come up with such neat ideas that sometimes I start going, oh, well, here, go there.
But you don't know if you don't follow the trail, and it may work for another book at another time.
Exactly.
You have to follow the trail for okay, which brings us to the next thing. Why are you writing? It's not like
the story is all.
Yes, the story is all, but it's not like you have a time frame. Okay, so you have time to enjoy the writing, to follow those things. So, Janice, why do you write?
I haven't a clue.
I know that's a good answer.
It's hard work at times. It requires discipline and mental acuity and mental energy, and I still can't help it. So that's why I write. And I suppose most people would say they're compelled and they have plot bunnies and they can't wait to get it. They do have a story to tell, but I honestly don't know. I just sit down and write when I'm in the mood.
Because sometimes when I do stuff, I don't know why I'm doing.
Oh,
I'm just
good.
compelled to do it. That is not just you. And there's no right answers. We all have different answers. Brian, why do you do it?
Oh no, here it comes.
Because it scratches a creative itch. It's immensely fulfilling and satisfying for all that it can be agonizing and an awful lot of hard work, as Jan said. But it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever done.
It is, like you said, anything creative. And taking it away from the writing, for those people who may not be wanting to write a book, take anything that you make. You sew a costume or something. At some point, you're going to be pulling your hair out and being very loud, and your family will say, "Why don't you just buy a costume?" And you're like, "No, I must figure this out. I must make it look as realistic as possible." So that drama, that thing in your life is actually, you breaking through that expression. I think what makes it hard and makes you cranky is that you want to take it to the next level. And I don't know either, Janice, why I want to write this book. I mean, we've been around enough to know and looked at the statistics enough to know that we're probably not going to make a fortune on this.
Sure.
So it has to be for the love of something, the passion of something. But I think maybe with Fading Expectations, you needed to write that book, Janice. I feel that was the book you were meant to write. Brian just has to write and write and write. But Bob is still, I as I said, I'm not a hardcore science fiction fan, but I liked Bob, and I've stated before my reasons for liking Bob. So okay, so that's a little bit about knowing ourselves, and knowing the book we're writing is going to sometimes change the way in which we write, the length of time it's going to take, how much research we're going to need to do. So now I'm going to get down to, okay, so knowing thyself, I'm expanding to know thy book and know thy life, because you're going to have to work around that to a degree. And now I'm going to go to the nitty gritty of know thy budget. We're going to find out in a few minutes whether I should be nervous about this or not. So, Janice, when do you consider a work completed enough to go to an editor? And with Brian, I'll make that the next step. But when do you feel that a work is completed enough to move on from your hands?
When I'm sick of it. When I'm very fortunate because I do have a good editor. So,
but she's retiring from editing, so that doesn't help the rest of us.
Well, she has retired. That is an issue, but she's kept me on, which is really. Yes. We learned very quickly after we had our first sparring match that we were going to become friends, and we did. And because she's working as a librarian and she's got other things to do. She's got a life. She has a life. So she will get to it when she can, which is fine with me. So that gives me a slight discount. And I also know that I don't possess or am interested in or something with the skills to write a really outlined script. So I just put the words on the paper or on the computer and I send them to her and we go through the edits. Well, it's extensive editing, but I find that she usually finds the important stuff. We tidy it up and out it goes. And that is probably the best way for me to work. If I had to think about, okay, I'm preparing this for an editor, I'd be in big trouble because I don't think I have those skills. Well, Brian has those skills.
The confidence.
You, I think, might have those skills.
That's our confidence building. But we are all different, and that's why we need to know ourselves. And I'm just going to say it. Janice is talking about MJ Moore, who was on here before with the bunnies, which we won't go any further, and the comedy. And MJ is a saint for what she charged and what she took on for that. Yes. So there are no other MJs out there, I don't think. And no wonder she's running away.
Yeah,
with
it
their
for
own.
an editor, it's so abusive for them. It can be very abusive in this day and age. It can be very abusive, and that there's no reason for that. You're a team, and if you don't have a good editor and you can't work with them, then you might as well just give up.
So you have to
Frankly,
find the right writing group and the
Mhm.
right editor.
Yeah.
Brian, so how far do you think a book goes until you take it to the next step?
That's an excellent question, but I don't have a good answer because it's,
There are no good or bad answers,
yeah,
Brian. There's only yours.
to me, the final level is putting the book up for sale.
Okay,
But
so
in
let's get
terms of when I start hardcore editing, is when the story is done and it feels done. And I can say, okay, I have a solid beginning, a solid middle, a solid end. I like many of the words. I won't like all of them, but that's what the editing is for. So at that point, as I put it aside for a week or two, and then I say, okay, I have to get back and start working on this. So the first thing I do is probably the wrong thing, is I do a quick spell check on it. Even though I know I'm going to be changing words, I can't stand to see as a misspelled word when I'm editing. So I'll send it through a spell checker, and there's lots of them. You can use Scrivener like I do. You can use Word. You can use a standalone spell checker. There's all sorts of ways of doing it. And then I'll go through and say, okay, from a structural point of view, and then I'll break it down chapter by chapter. What happens in this chapter? What makes it important for the story? Then I'll go to every scene within that chapter. So if you take it, it's sort of like a developmental editor, but it's more of a checklist to make sure that I haven't screwed up somewhere. Because it's very easy to
well,
is to change a character's name halfway through, for example, or to change a person's sex, or
Miss Janice took
oh
the name I was going to use for my main character,
oh well,
and I couldn't use the same one.
yeah. So and then I say, okay, I've gone through the process of identifying things, and that helps me to look at it from it's like a higher level, from the 10,000 foot view, and I go, okay, that chapter's too long. That chapter's too long. To me, every chapter should be a couple thousand words, plus or minus. I've had chapters 20,000 words. You go, well, no, that's just too darn big. But for a rough draft, it's fine. But now we're past the rough draft stage. Or sometimes I'll come across forgotten little instructions to myself saying, insert brilliant words here.
So, yeah, no, and go back and insert the brilliant words. Do you
Yeah.
hire someone for that?
I wish I could. At that point, I become kind of schizoid. And as a writer, I think my editor is an idiot. And as an editor, I think that the writer's an idiot. So, we have little discussions. And sometimes the characters themselves chime in. So it
So
becomes a very busy time.
you break it down to first checking the spelling and those things because they drive you
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But
And then
whoever
I go
wrote
into,
that is driving him crazy. And then you go to bigger structure issues and looking
Yep.
for plot holes.
Yep.
Okay, so how many times have we gone through the book at this point?
Oh, it doesn't.
Okay, so we're up to 12 times through the book.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Like, I don't just do one thing except for the initial spell check. I say, spell check, that's the first pretty automatic go through. That's where I catch things, like to make sure I spell words that have more than one spelling. Make sure they're consistent, like kilometer. It can be ER or RE. Both are correct, but the book should have one.
For consistency, the book
Yeah.
needs to be consistent.
So, or the word inquire. It can begin with an I or an E. Both are correct. Pick one. And that forces me, I guess, wearing my editor hat, to go through and create like a style guide
But
I
can
do
you
this with.
tell us what super editor looks like? Doesn't he have a helmet or something?
I thought you wanted this to be a nice show rather than me putting on my. Fine, you want silly helmets?
It would be Brian
I
without one.
have power. Okay, so now, well, because we have to tell the difference between Brian the author and Brian the editor. Now,
Right.
Brian the editor, hard-headed and
I have the power,
merciless. Yes, you just go in
And
there
I have my
set those words.
red pen. Never underestimate the power of the red pen. So I go through and I make sure that the
You can
idiot
take the
author
helmet
hasn't.
off now if you want to. It's distracting. We had our moment. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I make sure that the idiot author, as you say, doesn't have any plot holes or little gotchas, and break down the structure so that the chapters are basically correct. At that point, sometimes I find that this scene doesn't work in this chapter, works better further down, and that'll involve a little bit of a rewrite. Or I say, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. It does nothing for the story. So my editor mode says, take it out, put it to one side. But you never throw it away because you can always reuse it. Somewhere it'll get used.
No, or somewhere, yeah, you have like a shoebox of notes on scrap paper because he is very conservational.
I have file folders filled with story ideas and snippets, and it's a case of I will use them. Like, say I have a
you, Janice.
No. She's more than capable of writing her own brilliant words.
No,
she doesn't need
and
my dross.
Here's why. MJ was editing my book. I'm embarrassed. I mean, I sit down, I write. I failed phys ed. I failed grammar in school. I mean, come on.
Everybody failed grammar. You can't teach grammar. You have to read
okay.
and use
So anyway, MJ had put at the beginning of the book, she had put verb, adverb, noun, and the other two, adjective, and there's something else in there. So that's how you structure your sentence. No, it didn't happen. I looked at that and I wanted to cry. I can tell a noun from a verb usually, but anything above that kind of sentence structure, which is why I have an editor. You don't have to be really brilliant.
You know, some people, and we discussed that. Everybody has their talents. You are straight ahead, focused writer. I am not. I'm like, oh, but maybe she could do this. And what if she lived in the 19th century? Like, I don't have that focus. You know, Brian is an engineer. He builds a story. And before my story goes anywhere, as far as plot holes or anything, I'm shipping it to him. Only I'm going to check it about 6 times before that because I don't want Brian to find mistakes, okay? I want him to be right. But honestly, when I was doing some other writing, I took a course for professional writers.
Oh.
And I got 86% in the grammar section. Now, you don't know that when I'm doing my Facebook post. Okay. The other day, I didn't edit. I just was in a hurry. I went back and I went, oh, my goodness, Vicky, you put this out? Grammar is very tricky. Grammar is like, know the rules, then forget them. You know, there's some authors who are just like, I'm not even going there. But, I mean, fantastic writers, imaginary throughout time. The rest of us don't get to do that. But geniuses can
the other thing to keep in mind is you don't need to take a course. There are books. Like there's some books here that I bought. Probably too many books. Yes. I am a book person.
How many books do you have, Brian?
I am not going to give a number to the number of thousands that my wife and I have.
I thought it was 10.
No, I think it's only 6,000 or 7,000 at this point. But anyway, when I get interested in this as a subject, I will buy a bunch of books on it, just so I've got a reference. But for a writer, a couple of books on grammar are like essential. So if you
elements of style, it's just that elements of style.
Yep.
But white. It's only like this big, and you can open it up when you need it.
Yep. And or because I'm a Canadian, I have a Canadian English dictionary. I have the Book of Canadian Style. I have the Canadian Press style book. Because those style books, they both are aimed at different audiences, so they're both slightly different. But they'll discuss things like how, what are the proper military ranks in Canada? It's different from the U.S.
Yeah, no,
and
because
Britain.
In the
And
United States they have
and
lieutenants. In
yeah,
Canada they
and
have
what's the
lieutenants.
proper abbreviation for each rank? So that you're not making up your own.
No, these
There
are
are
the kind of
conventions.
details that take research and they take
Yeah.
time and they make the book. I just
Yeah.
want Janice to know, Janice, I believe I suck at grammar. Okay, this is where my Achilles heel is. This stops me because I'll just sit there looking at it. So I definitely want someone that's going to go over that for me. Even if it could do it, my confidence is not there for it, and
Right.
it's going to make the rest of my writing smaller. I won't take those big chances in story because I have to use funny sentences that have complicated grammar. So
But that's half the fun.
no, but I'm saying at the end, before I put it out there, I will. So okay, we talk too much. Let's go down to the hot topic that I know is going to be, this one's going to be confrontational, people. Do you do you think you need an editor? Brian, where are your pages? See, we should have started this right off the bat, Brian. But he condensed. All right, Janice, your first point. I'm going to have to do it this way because we've got 15 minutes left.
Okay.
And then Brian can counter address your subject.
All right. Wrong book. Alrighty.
She's throwing you off, Brian.
There's only 10 points here.
Okay,
And
go.
I will keep it brief.
So go 1 point, and then Brian
At
can
a time.
counter.
All right.
Okay.
You will get a fresh perspective with an editor. Argue that one, Ben.
Brian, how do you feel about you will get a fresh perspective with an editor?
Yes.
Okay.
An editor is trained to spot trouble. So yes, I think we can agree on that.
Okay,
Yep.
but if we're looking for,
But you can get around that.
No, I'm going to. I have it, Brian. What about? I'm going to say it wrong. Beta readers, or is it beta readers?
No.
Yes.
And one of the things they advise you against, well, beta readers, yes. Beta. I'm in Canada. Which is it? So anyway, beta readers should never, ever, ever be your friends.
No, they got to make you cry.
Yes.
Although my friends make me cry often, Brian, but but you need to have this is what people have to understand. If you're going to be a beta reader, be honest. I mean, bro, I don't like if someone sends me a story and I don't care for it, but they just said read this, Vicky, didn't ask anything. I won't say anything. Oh, it's not my job to do that. But if I have a friend that I think, I will tell them because I do love them and I think they need to hear that.
Yes.
So you can do that as well for the new perspective.
The other thing to keep in mind, if you have outside readers, shall we say, tell them what you're expecting from them.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like, say, are there any plot holes? Does it make sense? Do you like the story as a story, even if it's not a genre that you normally read? Does it hold together as a story?
Should you have different beta readers for different genres?
Should
you find beta readers that prefer your genre? I'm just asking that.
In a sense, no, because if somebody doesn't like the genre, odds are they're going to be more critical
of the story.
Well,
the stories,
or not necessarily the story is, but they'll question your assumptions.
Okay, you do that. I'm just sending my book to Brian, and
because he knows that I'll be cruel.
Gotta be cruel to be kind, baby. Gotta be cruel to be kind. Janice, point 2, and that doesn't mean I'm not agreeing with you, Janice. I'm just discussing.
That's quite all right. I still stick to my guns on this one.
Advertise.
I have an editor. Yeah.
3 different people with 3 different perspectives.
Absolutely. And that's cost is everything. And I sacrifice just about everything I have to get an editor, literally. And that's, I mean, I do, to the point of ridiculousness, because it is absolutely essential for me as a writer, the way I write, to have a professional editor.
I
Point
think
two,
I think
sorry,
if you can function it at all, it's a good way to go
it's
for
not
your own
easy.
confidence
It
at the
takes a long
beginning.
time to get my credit card paid down and the money that I'd saved. So yes, it takes a while, but
So you're
would I do it
saying
again?
focus. If that is your focus, it is your
That's
focus.
my focus. And in a heartbeat, I do it all over again. So editor,
And
number,
so okay, number
yeah,
two.
number two, an editor has a professional set of eyes. They've trained for years to get to that point. And I think it's, for me, the choice was a professional editor, not a hobbyist. And there's a lot of hobbyist editors out there. And I've seen some of their work, and it's just it lacks that structural content, that whole thing that makes your book work. And in my case, I need that kind of heavy duty
Well,
editing.
if you're going to get a hobbyist editor and you read a lot yourself and know about books, you might as well do it yourself. I mean, I think that's important. If you're going to get in, when you get in, I'm okay. If you don't get an editor, if you do get an editor, uh, you need to check their credentials. You need to talk to other. I mean, why wouldn't they have a list of authors that are willing to speak for them, right? What, check. Don't just send somebody over a check.
Yes. Yes.
Brian?
Yeah. If you can afford a professional editor that you have checked out, by all means. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's just that for
We're
me, the
talking
economics
about the
don't
money.
work out.
And
Yeah.
if it's
Like-
a choice between feeding the kids and getting a couple chapters edited at the end of the month,
You got to feed the kids.
you have
Yeah.
to feed the kids. So this is
the
the
other
point.
thing that we're talking about this is in the green room before the show, is the economics. Like if you're spending, call it $4,000 as for the editing, and you're making $2 profit per book in royalties, you have to sell 2,000 copies just to break even. And for me, the economics doesn't add up for me. Part of it is economics, part of it is because I'm cheap. I make no
Frugal.
apologies. Frugal, cheap, and because because I'm a do-it-yourself kind of guy.
Well, and you also like to do it yourself. And that's the point of, so I'm going to take a couple minutes here and say, is this going to change the game? Like, at first, it wasn't so much for an editor. And I'm not saying they don't earn their money. They earn their money. I don't want to rip the editors off from their money. Okay, make this clear at the beginning. I'm not saying they charge too much. It takes a lot to edit a book. So if it costs a certain amount to edit, is that going to take the voice away from those people who I want to hear from it most, like those people that are living in poverty, those people who have those experiences to add to a story? Are we still going to get that same kind of middle class writing that we sometimes get in published books? Like, I want to make sure that everybody can get the best book they can out there. So we'll be looking at alternatives, not alternatives to the editing, but how you can finance that or get down. Or I might have Janice in for advertising, how to get those books sold. See what happens when I try to speak properly and kindly and take everyone's feelings into consideration. My mouth just freezes. So
wait till our writers group in about 10 minutes. It'll be a lot different.
So
we're all sweetness and light.
No, we're not even finished this. Okay, Janice, third point.
Well, I'm going to skip some points here. If the editor does give you objective feedback, so it helps build your confidence. It helps you build your story arcs and so on. So you become a better writer.
Right, right. You learn. It's a learn as you go kind of process.
And they help you break down a sentence. Now, this is what MJ taught me. And ready? You break down a sentence. Subject first, verb second, the object third, or whatever the next one was. Subject is a verb, subject is a verb, subject is a verb, adjective, subject is a verb, adverb, subject is a verb, noun. See what I mean? it's crazy making. If I had to think that through, there'd be no book. It's just theoretically impossible.
But
So,
Brian will say, I'm answering for Brian, I can look in one of my books behind me and
yeah.
find that same formula. So it really does make a difference of who you are as a person. But the bottom line is, okay, I don't even think some people edit. I read a lot of books and for this show. And I go through a lot of books. And I don't even think some people check their own grammar, period. Like, it is about, I can get this book out for free and make money. So I think if your reason is not to make money, not that making money is a bad thing, because if I made money, I could afford an editor right off the bat with money saving ideas. But, if you really care about your book, you're going to do your best to get it edited, to get it done. And
I just want to point out something here is in terms of money. Programs like Word and there are other programs have some pretty good grammar checkers in them that do a good job of finding the basics. They're not perfect. They get a lot of false positives, but by and large, they do an excellent job as compared to even a few years ago of finding issues. Now, MJ's formula for sentences, which, as Vicky pointed out, you can find in the books, that's what these grammar checkers have, but that's not necessarily good writing. It might be a grammatically correct sentence, but you don't always want that. Sometimes you'll want a non-correct sentence to add punch, or you'll change it around because that's how your character just happens to speak. And that adds flavor to dialogue. You got to be careful not to go too far. But you have to know the rules in order to be able to break the rules. And you must break the rules if you want to have a non-formula book.
If you don't know the rules, you break the rules.
Yeah. The difference between...
Well, if you know the rules, then you can break them because you can play them, I think, is the idea of, and some days I'm like, grammar, we don't need no stinking grammar.
Takes you back to grade 7, doesn't it? It's a horrible experience.
I do not think, I will go to I do not think you can teach grammar. I think it needs to be assimilated through lots of reading and trying to write. And it's just something that, comes. And so I really will feel
it's a skill you can learn, but how it's taught is problematical. It should start with examples of good writing.
Examples are the only way to go. You need to have
and
examples.
Then you can say, look, as you liked how that sounded, these are the rules they're following. Well, having at least a nodding acquaintance with the rules allows you to understand what you're reading a little better and to appreciate that better. That helps you as a reader, but more importantly for us as a writer. You don't need to know the exact details of the rules. That's what editors are for. But as a writer, you should at least have a grasp so you know how to better play with the language.
Because all your sentences are going to get changed around, and how people speak and their. I have grammar anxiety. That's why I took the course. I just present on. It's why I just grammar is my thing, and it's probably one of the things that has held me back from writing.
With a personal disclosure here, I live a poverty level like the rest of us. Basically, we're not up there. I found a way as a Canadian. I'm very fortunate. I pay income tax. I don't have to, but if I pay income tax at the end of the year, I just about paid my editor because I get it back.
Well, and this is
so
the
it's
thing,
a forced savings. So because I'm one of these people, I just am not that kind of a writer that would be able to do what Brian does, or I don't have the insight that perhaps you do, Vicky. Everybody's different, and I have to. Well, no, but you have no
insight. But she is a problem solver. I'm a practical person.
Yes.
And so I'm going to head into this without having an opinion and see what can be done. I might have a show with Brian just about how he edits his books. And to be honest, out there, people, you can find typos in published books.
Yep.
I mean,
True.
do you ever go through a published book without a typo? I don't. I considered that we should make the typos because then it would prove we aren't AI. Listeners, but then, they would learn to make typos themselves. So they're too clever. They're going to catch up with us.
It has to do with whether or not you want perfect work. Now, there was a joke I read earlier today about Moses coming off the mountain and then working 6 months to get it published, the 10 Commandments. That's just the way it is. It and edited. That's the way it is for writers. So you work with what you have and you work around what you have. And I'm finished writing for a while, so now I'm going to be able to maybe take a little vacation.
So where are you going? Why didn't you tell me that earlier? I need time.
Or you can buy more copies of my books.
We could do that too.
Buy copies of Brian's books, not after your attitude. Okay, so I figure once a month, I'm going to do the quest of the Wannabe Author. So we can continue this discussion later on, or I can go on myself. If you two are even speaking, we'll find out.
Oh, we've been arguing about this for years. So.
I know, but I keep changing the subject because so we can continue that and find out the different things that are out there. I've been reading some different boards on this, and people will say I'd much rather read something that hasn't been professional edited if it has a different point of view that I'm not getting from the perfection of a thing. And so people, like, for me, as long as I know what it's saying, like, as long as it doesn't stop me, if how I have to run through my reading. So if I get tripped up 2 or 3 times because of this, the book is going to go. But if I can understand, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh my gosh, they made a typo, because everybody makes typos. And I think the important thing to remember is that if you do edit yourself, well, your wife reads it too, doesn't she, Brian?
Not so much anymore. Her current excuse is, she'll look and say, "Very nice, dear. Bob has suffered sufficiently."
Well, he has. I agree with her on that.
But she's one that pushes me. Is her question every night is, "Well, dear, have you made Bob suffer?" But she won't give any more feedback than that because, as she says, she has to sleep with me.
Oh, she needs to get tougher.
I think so. Her sister, on the other hand, is really mean. Her sister doesn't like me much.
But other people see it. I think the important thing is that it is hard to find your own typos and your own, because the word that's supposed to be there. So I think you need to have other people look at it that are not your best friends.
There are techniques you can use, like, for example, read out loud your words.
Yes. Well, and that will give you the lyrics. Like, they'll make you sound properly as well, not just see them in there. But I always find, it's like singing. You don't know how it is really working unless you read it out loud.
Yeah.
Right. And to be able to take constructive criticism, that goes if you get an editor, or, you have to not be stubborn if it's for the good of the book. See, I'm the
story is all.
So
that is why I came up with that, is because you have to be your own worst critic. You have to know a bit of grammar. You have to know. you have to know how to analyze the story, is to make the story work, and then you pass it on to your editor, and it makes their life easier, and it makes them not hate you.
Yes, and MJ is a saint. Let's all just say this, okay? The more I read on that, MJ is a saint. She's going to be back in November, and she's going to talk to us about her new series as well as editing then as well. Okay, so I'm planning to be back on August 3rd for once in every month to come back and, the ideas or whatever. People, if you're out there writing, you're joining in, let us know. And any questions you have or specifics about your work, we'll probably pick up on the editing then again if you guys want to come back with me, or I can take it on your own depending on what you're doing. You're always invited. Until it was great. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna keep you on until the end so you can wave goodbye like I'm Mr. Dress Up. So I will see you all in a week. Until then, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone.